Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work the night shift at a warehouse. Been doing it for 3 years now because the pay is decent and I don't have to deal with people much. I get home around 3 a.m., wind down for an hour or so, then sleep until noon. It's a simple routine that works for me. About 6 months ago, I adopted this cat from the shelter. She was this tiny black and white thing, super sweet when I met her. The volunteer told me she was calm and perfect for apartment living. What a joke that turned out to be. I named her after my grandmother, but let's just call her Karen because that's basically what she is. This cat has zero respect for boundaries, schedules, or basic decency. At first, it was cute. She'd follow me around, purr when I got home from work, sleep curled up next to me. Normal cat stuff. But then she started getting comfortable. Too comfortable. The problem started small. She'd knock things off my desk while I was trying to pay bills online. Knock over my water glass during dinner. Nothing major, just annoying. I figured she was still adjusting to her new home, but then it escalated. This cat decided that my sleep schedule was personally offensive to her. Every single day around 4 or 5 a.m., she'd find new ways to wake me up. Not because she was hungry, her food bowl would still be half full. Not because her litter box needed cleaning, I keep up with that religiously. She was just bored and apparently thought I should entertain her. One morning she knocked over my favorite coffee mug, the one my sister got me for Christmas with a funny saying on it, shattered all over the kitchen floor. I had to clean it up in my pajamas at 4:30 a.m. because I was worried about stepping on glass later. Another time she somehow got into my closet and pulled down 3 shirts from their hangers, just yanked them down and left them in a pile. When I found the mess, she was sitting right next to it, grooming herself like nothing happened. But the worst was when she discovered she could knock socks off the radiator in my bedroom. I hang my work clothes there to dry overnight, and she'd specifically target the socks. I'd wake up to find them scattered across the floor like confetti. The final straw happened last Tuesday. I'd gotten home from an especially long shift. Some equipment had broken down and we had to work overtime to meet a shipping deadline. I was exhausted, more tired than I'd been in months. I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m. as deep, peaceful sleep for once. At exactly 4:47 a.m., chaos erupted. First, I heard the familiar crash of my water glass hitting the floor. Then some kind of thumping noise from the radiator. Before I could even process what was happening, this furry missile launched herself directly onto my chest and ran across me like I was a highway. I bolted upright, heart pounding, thinking there was a burglar or a fire or something genuinely dangerous happening. I stumbled out of bed, adrenaline pumping, ready to defend my home. She was just sitting by her food bowl, completely calm, looking at me like I was the crazy one for being awake. I asked her what was wrong and what all that noise was about. She just blinked slowly and started grooming her paw. I told her she had woken me up for nothing. She had the audacity to meow at me like she was annoyed that I was asking questions. I was furious but too tired to do anything about it. I cleaned up the water, picked up the sock from across the room, and made coffee since sleep was clearly over for the night. While I sat there drinking my coffee in the dark, plotting my revenge, she curled up in her fancy cat bed and went to sleep. The same cat bed I spent $60 on because the pet store employee convinced me she needed something ergonomic. I spent the rest of the morning thinking about it. This cat had been terrorizing my sleep schedule for months. She destroyed my property, disrupted my routine, and shown zero remorse. If she was a person, she'd be the type to complain to the manager about having to wait in line. So I decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. That afternoon, she was doing her usual dramatic nap routine. She has this thing where she sleeps on her back with one paw draped over her eyes like some kind of Victorian lady having the vapors, complete with the loudest purring you've ever heard. She was totally dead to the world. I snuck into the kitchen and grabbed a sheet of aluminum foil from the drawer. This cat hates the sound of crinkly things, but she'd never experienced foil before. I walked back to the living room where she was sprawled out on the couch. She looked so peaceful and innocent. almost made me feel bad for what I was about to do. Almost. I held the foil up and gave it one slow, deliberate crinkle. The reaction was instant and glorious. She literally levitated off the couch. I'm talking full cartoon physics here. All four paws left the cushion at the same time. She spun in a complete circle midair, like she was trying to locate the source of this offensive sound. When she landed, she looked around like she'd been transported to an alien planet. Eyes wide, first standing up, completely confused about what had just happened to her peaceful afternoon. Then she did exactly what I do when she wakes me up at 4 a.m. She gave me the most indignant look I've ever seen from a living creature and walked out of the room. Her tail was puffed up to twice its normal size, and she was walking like she was personally offended by my existence. I asked her how it felt to have her sleep interrupted for no good reason. She paused in the doorway and looked back at me with pure hatred in her eyes. I told her she didn't like it much. She glared at me before disappearing down the hallway. She's been giving me suspicious looks ever since. Every time I walk into a room, she checks to see if I'm carrying foil. When I open kitchen drawers, she runs away. She's developed a healthy respect for my ability to disrupt her peace. She hasn't woken me up at 4 a.m. even once since the foil incident. Apparently, the threat of being startled awake is enough to make her reconsider her morning terrorism routine. Now when I get home from work, she greets me politely and goes about her business. She still knocks things over occasionally, but it's gone from daily destruction to maybe once a week. Progress. I keep a piece of foil on my nightstand now, just as a reminder. She eyes it warily every time she walks past my bedroom. It was supposed to be a simple Sunday shopping trip. My sister's birthday was coming up, and I'd promised to find her that specific perfume she'd been talking about for months. You know how it is? She dropped hints for weeks, showed me pictures on her phone, even wrote down the exact name on a sticky note. I couldn't mess this up. The problem was that I procrastinated until the last minute. Her birthday party was that evening, and the mall was my only hope of finding something decent. I should have known better than to go shopping on a Sunday afternoon, especially during the busy season when everyone else had the same brilliant idea. The parking lot was absolutely packed. I've been driving around in circles for about 15 minutes, watching other drivers swoop in and steal spots right before I could get to them. My gas gauge was getting dangerously low, and I was starting to panic about being late to the party. That's when I spotted it, a perfect parking space right near the main entrance. It was like a gift from the shopping gods. I put on my turn signal and started to pull in, already mentally celebrating my good fortune. But when I got closer, I realized something was very wrong. There was a woman standing right in the middle of the parking space, arms crossed like she was guarding a treasure chest. She was wearing this bright floral dress that looked like it belonged in a garden catalog, and she had this determined expression on her face that immediately told me I was in for trouble. I rolled down my window, thinking maybe she'd just finished loading her car and was about to move. I asked her politely if she was leaving the spot. The woman looked at me like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. She told me coldly that she wasn't leaving because she was saving the spot for her husband, who would be arriving any minute. I blinked, sure I'd misheard her. I explained to her that she couldn't just stand in a parking space to save it because that wasn't how parking lots worked. She shot back that she was doing exactly that and had been standing there for 10 minutes waiting for him. She demanded that I find another spot instead of bothering her. Behind me, I could hear car horns starting to honk. A line of vehicles had formed, all waiting to see what would happen. Some drivers were craning their necks out of their windows, clearly annoyed by the holdup. I tried to reason with her, explaining that there were rules and she couldn't reserve parking spaces by standing in them. She launched into a rant about rules, telling me that she paid taxes in the city which gave her every right to use the parking space however she wanted. She went on about how her husband had a very important job and shouldn't have to walk far from the car. The honking behind me was getting louder. I could see in my rearview mirror that the line of cars now stretched back almost to the parking lot entrance. Some drivers were starting to back up and look for other routes through the lot. I pointed out that her husband's job didn't give her the right to block a public parking space and that she was causing a traffic jam. She declared that she didn't care about traffic and launched into another speech about how her husband worked 60 hours a week providing for their family. She said he deserved convenience and called me lazy for not being willing to look for my own parking spot. This was getting ridiculous. The woman was completely delusional if she thought standing in a parking space was a legitimate strategy. I'd never encountered anything like this before, and I honestly wasn't sure how to handle it. That's when I noticed a mall security guard walking nearby. He was checking the other cars in the lot, probably making sure people weren't parked in fire lanes or handicapped spots without permits. I called out to the officer and asked if he could help us with the situation. The security guard walked over, looking tired like he'd already dealt with too much drama for one day. He asked what the problem was. I explained that the woman was standing in a parking space claiming she was saving it for her husband, that there was a line of cars waiting and she refused to move. The security guard looked at Karen, then at the growing line of increasingly angry drivers behind me. He told her that she couldn't stand in parking spaces to reserve them because it was against mall policy and was creating a safety hazard. He ordered her to move immediately. She scoffed at the idea of a safety hazard and insisted that the only hazard was people not respecting others. She launched into yet another speech about her husband's demanding career in corporate management, describing his 12-hour days and constant business travel. She argued that he shouldn't have to walk across an entire parking lot after the difficult week he'd had. The security guard said he didn't care what her husband did for work and repeated that she couldn't block parking spaces. He told her to move immediately or he'd have to call for backup so they could discuss the matter further. Karen was waving her arms around dramatically. She accused us all of discrimination and claimed we were ganging up on her because she was standing up for what was right. She bragged that her husband generated more tax revenue for the city than any of us combined, and when he arrived, he would want to speak to the supervisor. Just then, a car pulled up in the row behind us. The driver rolled down his window and shouted across the parking lot, asking Karen what she was doing. He told her he had parked by the department store entrance 5 minutes earlier and had been looking everywhere for her. The silence that followed was absolutely golden. You could practically see her trying to figure out how to save face in front of the growing crowd of witnesses. She stammered that he should have told her he found a different spot. Her husband replied that he had tried calling her 3 times, but her phone was turned off. Without another word, Karen walked away from the parking space, her floral dress billowing behind her like a deflated parachute. She walked toward her husband's car and I could hear her starting to yell at him before she even got there. The security guard told me I could park now and apologized for the mess. I thanked him for his help and pulled into the parking space with the biggest smile on my face. The cars behind me started moving again, and I could hear a few drivers giving little celebratory honks when they passed by. When I walked toward the mall entrance, I could still see Karen in the distance, gesticulating wildly at her poor husband, who looked like he just wanted to disappear into the asphalt. I found my sister's perfume, made it to her birthday party on time, and had the best story to tell everyone there. I'm a single dad to my 8-year-old son. Been raising him on my own since his mom passed away 3 years ago in a car accident. It's been tough, but we've managed to build a good life together. We live in a quiet neighborhood where most people keep to themselves, but everyone's generally friendly. My son loves being outdoors. He's got this boundless energy that I can barely keep up with sometimes. Our house has a decent-sized backyard, but like most kids his age, he prefers playing in the front yard, where he can see other kids walking by and maybe make some friends. There's this small strip of grass between our driveway and the sidewalk where he likes to play with his toy cars and action figures. The house next to ours had been empty for about 6 months until this woman moved in about 2 months ago. From day one, she made it clear she wasn't the neighborly type. She never returned waves, never made eye contact, and had this constant scowl on her face whenever she saw anyone. I tried to introduce myself and my son when she first moved in, but she just stared at us like we were bothering her and went inside without saying a word. Last Tuesday started like any normal day. I was working on a logo design for a client while my son played outside. I could see him through the window, and he was having a great time with his new remote control car that I gotten him for his birthday last week. The car was pretty cool. It could do tricks and had LED lights that flashed different colors. Everything was fine until around 2 in the afternoon. I heard my son laughing loudly outside, which wasn't unusual, but then I heard this woman's voice yelling, and it made me look up from my computer. I saw her standing at the edge of her property with a garden hose in her hands. She was pointing it toward my son and shouting something I couldn't quite make out from inside. I got up and headed toward the front door to see what was going on. My son was politely asking if he could have his car back, explaining that it had just rolled over there by accident. Karen was screaming at him to get off her property right away, saying she didn't want him or his stupid toys anywhere near her yard. My son tried to explain that the toy was just right there by her flowers and that he could grab it really quick, but she kept yelling at him to get away from there. That's when I stepped outside and saw what was happening. My son's remote control car had somehow ended up about 2 feet onto her property right next to her flower bed. He was standing on the sidewalk, not even on her property, just asking for his toy back. I asked what the problem was. Karen immediately started screaming that my brat was trespassing on her property and disturbing her peace. I tried to explain that he was 8 years old and his toy had accidentally rolled onto her yard, and that he was just asking for it back. She said she didn't care how old he was and demanded that I keep him away from her property. I walked over to grab the car myself, thinking that would solve the problem. But when I stepped toward her yard, she did something I never expected. She turned on the hose and aimed it straight at my son. The water pressure was incredibly high. This wasn't just a regular garden sprinkler setting. It hit my son square in the chest with such force that he immediately lost his balance and fell backward onto the concrete sidewalk. I heard the sickening sound of his head hitting the pavement, but she didn't stop there. While my son was on the ground, clearly hurt and crying, she kept spraying him with the hose. The water was hitting him in the face and he was struggling to get up while coughing and gasping. I screamed at her, asking what was wrong with her and demanding that she stop that right now. I started running toward my son, but she kept the hose aimed at him. The water was so powerful that every time he tried to sit up, it would knock him back down. Karen yelled that maybe now he would learn to stay off her property. My son was screaming and crying, water going up his nose and in his mouth. I was about 10 feet away when I saw our neighbor from across the street come running over. She's this sweet elderly lady who spends most of her time tending to her garden. I talked to her a few times and she always asked about my son and how we were doing. My neighbor shouted at Karen, asking what she thought she was doing. Without any hesitation, she grabbed Karen by the shoulders and shoved her hard enough that Karen stumbled and fell onto her own lawn. The hose went flying and finally stopped spraying my son. The neighbor told Karen that she doesn't spray a child with a hose like that and asked if she was insane. I immediately ran to my son and picked him up. He was soaking wet, shivering, and had a nasty bump forming on the back of his head where he'd hit the sidewalk. There was a small cut that was bleeding a little bit. Karen started yelling that she wanted hands off her and that she would have my neighbor arrested for assault. My neighbor shot back that Karen had just assaulted a child and that she had seen the whole thing. Karen claimed that my son was trespassing and that she had every right to protect her property. I told her that he wasn't even on her property, and even if he was, she couldn't attack a child like that. I was holding my son, trying to calm him down while checking to make sure he wasn't seriously injured. He was still crying and kept saying his head hurt. I was getting more and more angry by the second. Karen demanded that all of us get off her property right now or she would call the police. My neighbor told her to go ahead and call them because she would love to explain to them what she had just witnessed. I said that I would call them myself. I pulled out my phone and dialed while still holding my son. When the dispatcher answered, I explained that my neighbor had just assaulted my child with a high-pressure water hose. While we waited for the police, Karen kept yelling at all of us to get away from her house. She claimed she was the victim and that we were all harassing her. My neighbor stayed with us the whole time, telling my son he was going to be okay and asking if he needed anything. When the officers arrived, they immediately separated us and started taking statements. One officer talked to me while another spoke with Karen, and a third took my neighbor's statement since she'd witnessed everything. The officer talking to me was really professional and thorough. He took photos of my son's head injury and the wet sidewalk. He asked if there had been any ongoing dispute between me and my neighbor. I told him no, nothing like this, explaining that she wasn't friendly, but we'd never had any real interaction until today. He also asked where exactly my son was when she started spraying him. I explained that he was standing on the public sidewalk and that his toy had rolled onto her property by accident. The officer who talked to Karen came back looking pretty serious. Apparently, her story kept changing. First, she said my son was destroying her flowers, then she said he was threatening her, then she claimed he was trying to break into her house. None of it made any sense, but the real game changer was my neighbor's statement. She'd seen the entire thing from her garden and was able to give a detailed account of exactly what happened. She confirmed that my son was never on Karen's property and that he was just standing on the sidewalk when Karen started spraying him. The officer told Karen that based on the witness statements and the evidence, they were going to have to place her under arrest for assault on a minor. Karen screamed that it was ridiculous and that she was defending her property. The officer explained that she had used excessive force against a child who posed no threat to her or her property, and that she was being arrested for assault in the third degree. Watching her get handcuffed was honestly one of the most satisfying moments I've ever experienced. She kept screaming about how unfair it was and how she was going to sue everyone involved. She yelled that it was harassment and that she was the victim. The officer told her she had the right to remain silent and suggested she use it. After they took her away, the other officer gave me information about pressing charges and following up with the prosecutor's office. He also recommended that I take my son to get checked out by a doctor just to make sure there wasn't any serious head injury. My neighbor walked us back to our house and helped me get my son cleaned up and into some dry clothes. She stayed until I was sure he was okay, and even offered to watch him if I needed to take him to the hospital. She told me that she had been gardening in that same spot for 15 years and had never seen anything like that. She wondered what kind of person attacks a child like that. I said I honestly didn't know, and that I was just glad she was there to help. She mentioned that Karen had been nothing but trouble since she moved in, and that she had seen her yelling at other kids in the neighborhood too. The next day I got a call from the prosecutor's office. They wanted to move forward with the assault charges and asked if I'd be willing to testify if it went to trial. I didn't even hesitate to say yes. 2 weeks later, Karen pleaded guilty to assault in the third degree. She got 6 months probation, had to pay a fine, and was ordered to take anger management classes. The judge also issued a restraining order that prevents her from coming within 50 feet of my son or our property. She put her house up for sale the very next day. I guess the reality of having a criminal record and being known throughout the neighborhood as the woman who attacks children was too much for her to handle. My son recovered completely from his injuries, though he's still a bit nervous about playing in the front yard. We've been working on that together, and he's getting more comfortable each day. The remote control car survived too, though it took a few days to completely dry out. My daughter had worked hard for 4 years to earn her degree in engineering. She pulled countless all-nighters, struggled through calculus and physics, and even changed her major once before finding her passion. As her father, I was bursting with pride. My wife and I had saved up for years to help her through college, and seeing her graduate was going to be one of the most important moments of our lives. We arrived at the graduation venue early that morning with my 2 sons in tow. The whole family wanted to be there to support her. The ceremony was being held in the university's large auditorium with bleacher-style seating that gave families a good view of the stage. We found decent seats about halfway up, with a clear line of sight to where our daughter would walk across the stage to receive her diploma. The place was packed with excited families, everyone dressed in their best clothes, holding flowers and cameras. You could feel the anticipation in the air. Parents were adjusting their phones and cameras, making sure they had the perfect angle to capture their child's big moment. This was it, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. That's when they showed up. Two young women, probably in their early 20s, climbed up the bleachers and sat directly behind us. Within minutes, they started talking. And I don't mean quiet conversation, I mean full volume chatting like they were at a coffee shop. They were discussing everything from their weekend plans to some drama with their friends, completely oblivious to the fact that this was a solemn ceremony. At first, I tried to ignore it. Maybe they would quiet down once the ceremony actually started. But when the minutes ticked by and the speakers began giving their opening remarks, they just kept going. Their voices were carrying over everything, making it impossible to hear what was being said on stage. I turned around and looked at them politely. I asked them nicely if they could please keep it down a bit because we were trying to hear the speakers. The first woman looked at me like I had just asked her to donate a kidney. She told me that they were just talking right now and it wasn't even the real graduation yet, so they could talk how much they wanted to. Her friend nodded in agreement, giving me a look that clearly said I should mind my own business. I was stunned by their attitude, but I turned back around, hoping they would at least lower their voices a little. They didn't. If anything, they got louder. I could hear them snickering behind me, and I swear they were being extra obnoxious just to spite me. Every time a speaker tried to give an inspiring speech about the graduates' achievements, these two were chattering away about their nail appointments and which bars they wanted to hit that weekend. My sons, who were sitting on either side of me, could see how frustrated I was getting. They kept exchanging looks with each other and with me. My wife was sitting closer to the stage in a different section. She'd arrived separately and found a spot with a better camera angle for our daughter's walk. That's when we overheard something useful. During their endless conversation, one of the women mentioned her brother by name. She said she couldn't wait to see the look on her mom's face when she saw the video of Raekwon walking across that stage. Her friend agreed that their mom was going to cry for sure because she'd been bragging about him to everyone at work. The first woman said she knew and that she had her phone all ready to record because it was going to be perfect. My youngest son immediately pulled out his phone and started scrolling through the graduation program. Within a few minutes, he found what we were looking for. There was only one graduate named Raekwon in the entire ceremony. He showed me the program, and I could see exactly when Raekwon would be called up and who would be announced right before him. My sons started texting each other, and then they included me in the conversation. The plan formed quickly and silently. My oldest son asked if I was thinking what he was thinking. My youngest son said those two deserved exactly what they were giving everyone else. I told them I was listening. My oldest son suggested that since we knew exactly when their brother was walking, what if we made sure their recording didn't turn out so well? The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. We would wait until the graduate right before Raekwon was announced, then all three of us would stand up and cheer loudly. We'd block their view, ruin their audio, and give them a taste of their own medicine. When the ceremony continued, the two women behind us kept up their non-stop commentary. They talked through every speech, every musical performance, and every moment that other families were trying to cherish. Other people around us were starting to shoot them dirty looks, but they were completely oblivious. When the actual diploma presentations began, Karen got her phone ready. She was positioning it perfectly, adjusting the angle, making sure she had the best possible shot of her brother's moment. She told her friend that this was it, and their mom was going to love this video. Her friend reminded her to make sure she got the handshake with the dean too. My sons and I were ready. We had identified the graduate who would be called right before Raekwon, a young woman studying biology. The moment her name was announced, we executed our plan. All three of us shot up from our seats like rockets. We started waving our arms wildly over our heads and screaming at the top of our lungs. I was shouting congratulations and cheering loudly. My sons were yelling encouragement and making incredible amounts of noise. We kept it up through the entire announcement of the biology student, and then continued even louder when Raekwon's name was called. We were jumping, cheering, and making noise. Anyone watching would have thought Raekwon was our own son. Behind us, I could hear Karen frantically trying to get a good shot. She was telling us to sit down because she couldn't see, and we were ruining everything. But we didn't stop. We cheered through Raekwon's entire walk across the stage. his handshake with the dean, and his exit on the other side. By the time we finally sat down, it was over. Karen immediately started replaying the video on her phone and we could hear her reaction. She was saying the recording was garbage and all you could hear were us idiots screaming. She complained that you couldn't see anything because we were standing up the whole time. Her friend asked if she could try to edit it or something. Karen said there was nothing to edit because there was nothing there, just noise and the backs of our heads. She tried playing it several more times, each attempt accompanied by increasingly colorful language about our family. But every replay confirmed the same thing. Their precious recording was completely ruined. My wife, positioned in her perfect spot near the stage, had captured our daughter's graduation moment flawlessly. When our daughter's name was called about 20 minutes later, we cheered appropriately, still enthusiastic but respectfully, and my wife got beautiful video and photos that we'll treasure forever. After the ceremony ended, the two women behind us were still complaining loudly about their ruined video when they gathered their things. They shot us dirty looks when they passed by, but what could they say? We had simply been enthusiastic audience members, just like they had claimed the right to be chatty audience members. When we walked out of the auditorium to meet our daughter for pictures, my oldest son put his arm around my shoulder. He told me that was the most satisfying thing he'd ever been part of. I said that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. We found our daughter outside glowing with pride in her cap and gown. She had no idea what had happened during the ceremony, and honestly, that was perfect. Her day remained untainted by the drama. She got her moment, we got our memories, and somewhere out there, two people learned that actions have results. The drive home was filled with laughter when we told my wife and daughter about our spontaneous revenge plan. Even our daughter, who's usually the peacemaker in the family, couldn't stop giggling at the story. She said she couldn't believe we had done that, but honestly, they kind of deserved it. My wife said she was just glad she was in the front and got everything on video, and she couldn't wait to show it to the grandparents. We celebrated at dinner that night, surrounded by family and looking at the beautiful photos and videos of our daughter's achievement. I work in tech support at a mid-sized company, and while the pay isn't amazing, I've been saving up for the past year. My brother and his wife have been going through some financial struggles lately. He lost his job 6 months ago, and they've been making ends meet with just her income from working at a local grocery store. Their daughter, my niece, has been using this beat-up old iPhone that's barely hanging on. The screen is so cracked you can hardly see anything, and the battery dies within a couple hours of being off the charger. I have a soft spot for my niece. She's smart and gets good grades, but I could see she was embarrassed about her phone at school. Kids can be cruel about that stuff, and I remember what it was like being the kid with the outdated everything. A few weeks ago, I overheard her complaining to her mom about how her phone kept shutting off during important calls, and how she couldn't even take decent photos for her school projects. So when I got some Apple gift cards as bonuses from work, we get them sometimes instead of cash bonuses for tax reasons, I figured this was perfect. I had enough saved up along with the gift cards to get her a really nice upgrade. I spent weeks researching which phone would be best, reading reviews, comparing features. The iPhone 16 in 256 gigabytes seemed perfect. Plenty of storage, great camera, latest features, and I even picked pink because I remembered her mentioning she liked that color. I was so excited to surprise her. I wrapped it up nice and brought it over last Sunday for family dinner. When I handed her the box, she got this huge smile and started tearing at the wrapping paper. I was recording on my phone because I wanted to capture her reaction. She opened the box and her face just changed completely. She looked disappointed and asked if it wasn't the Pro version. I was confused and told her it was the newest iPhone 16 model they made. She explained that it wasn't the Pro version, which had better cameras and more features. I was confused because this phone had everything she could possibly need and more. The camera was incredible compared to her old phone. It had tons of storage, and it was literally the latest model. I tried to explain that this was still an amazing phone and a huge upgrade from what she had now, but she insisted that all her friends had the pro versions, and this was just the regular one. My brother and his wife were just sitting there, looking uncomfortable. I could tell they knew this was getting awkward but weren't sure what to say. I reminded her that this phone cost $800 and had everything she needed and way more. Then she asked if I could return it and get her the Pro instead, saying it was only like $200 more. I was shocked. Only $200 more. That's a lot of money to me, and it was definitely a lot of money to her parents who were struggling to pay their bills. I told her that if she wanted a different phone, she could return this one or sell it and pay the difference herself. That's when things got really uncomfortable. My niece got this attitude and crossed her arms. She complained that it wasn't fair and asked why I couldn't just spend the extra $200 since I had already spent the money anyway. My brother finally spoke up, but not in the way I expected. He said I really should have asked them first before buying something this expensive. I was shocked. Here I was, trying to do something nice for their daughter, spending my own money that I had saved up, and now I was getting lectured. I told them I was trying to do something nice because I saw she needed a new phone and wanted to help. My sister-in-law jumped in and said I should have checked with them about what kind of phone to get, and now their daughter was disappointed. The niece jumped back in and complained that everyone at school was going to think this was a cheap phone because the Pro versions were what everyone had. I told her this was not a cheap phone and that this was an $800 phone that most adults would be thrilled to have. My brother said I was missing the point and should have coordinated with them instead of just showing up with whatever I picked out. I was getting frustrated because I felt like I was being attacked for doing something generous. I explained that I had spent weeks researching this phone and picked the best one I could afford with all the features she needs. But my niece just kept insisting she didn't want this one and wanted the Pro instead. My sister-in-law agreed that she was right to be disappointed because I had gotten her hopes up and then didn't get what she actually wanted. At this point, I was done. I stood up and took the phone box back. I told them they were absolutely right, and I should have asked first. I put the phone back in my bag while they all stared at me. I said I would return it tomorrow and they could figure out how to get her the phone she actually wanted with their own money. My brother tried to backtrack and said that wasn't what they meant. I told them no, they were right, and I had overstepped. This was clearly not good enough for her. My niece tried to say she didn't say it wasn't good enough, just that she wanted the Pro version. I told her I just wanted to do something nice for my niece, who I thought would appreciate getting a brand new phone instead of using one held together with tape. The room went quiet. I could see my brother and his wife exchanging looks. I told them I would take this back to the store tomorrow, and maybe she could save up her babysitting money for the Pro version she wanted. I started walking toward the door. My sister-in-law tried to say that maybe we all got a little heated, but I told her no, it was fine and I had learned my lesson about trying to help. When I was leaving, I heard my niece asking her parents if they were going to buy her the Pro version instead. My brother told her they couldn't afford it right now, and she started complaining about how unfair it was. The next day, instead of returning the phone, I decided to keep it for myself. My own phone was getting old anyway, and clearly I was the only one who could appreciate getting an $800 phone as a gift. I texted my brother to let him know I was keeping it since nobody seemed to want it. A few hours later, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts. Apparently, when my niece found out I kept the phone instead of returning it so she could get store credit toward the Pro, she had a complete meltdown. She told her parents it wasn't fair that I was stealing her phone and they should make me give it back. My brother called me, demanding I return the phone to the store so they could use the credit toward a Pro model. He said I was being petty and vindictive. I told him that the phone was bought with my money and my gift cards, so it was actually my phone to do whatever I wanted with. 2 weeks later, my niece's old phone finally died completely, and now she has no phone at all while she saves up money for the one she actually wants. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my new iPhone 16, and every time I use the amazing camera or notice how fast it runs, I remember why I thought it was such a great gift in the first place. My husband and I have been together since we were teenagers. We met when I was 17 and he was also 17, just two goth kids who found each other in the sea of preppy classmates at our high school. We bonded over our love of dark music, horror movies, and anything that made our parents roll their eyes. By the time we were 19, we were planning our dream wedding. I had saved up for months to buy this gorgeous black dress with lace sleeves that made me feel like a gothic princess. Then life happened. I got pregnant, and suddenly my dad was breathing down our necks about getting married immediately. He gave us an ultimatum: get married right away or find somewhere else to live. We were broke teenagers with no backup plan, so we ended up having a courthouse wedding instead of the ceremony we'd dreamed of. I love my husband and I don't regret marrying him, but I always felt like I missed out on having that special day that were truly ours. Fast forward 15 years. We've built a good life together, bought our own property, and we're financially stable. This year marks our 15th wedding anniversary, and I decided it was finally time to have the celebration we never got. I wanted to do something that reflected who we are now, not who everyone else thinks we should be. Back in January, I announced to my family that we were planning a vow renewal ceremony for Halloween. It made perfect sense to us. We're still very much into the goth and witchy aesthetic. Halloween is our favorite time of year, and it would be absolutely perfect for the kind of ceremony we always wanted. Our property has this beautiful wooded area that would look amazing decorated for Halloween, and the timing would let us incorporate all the spooky elements we love. My sister, who's 5 years younger than me, seemed excited at first. She had just gotten married 3 years ago and had her own vow renewal last weekend, which was lovely. It was very traditional and sweet, exactly what she wanted. I was genuinely happy for her and her husband. Their ceremony was beautiful, and I thought maybe she'd understand why I wanted something special for my own anniversary. But then she started getting involved in my planning. At first, I thought she was just being helpful and supportive. She'd text me ideas and suggestions, which I appreciated, but then the suggestions started getting weird. She texted me one day saying she'd been thinking about my Halloween date and wondering if it might be too spooky for our dad. I told her it was what we wanted and that it was meaningful to us and that Dad would understand. But she kept pushing, saying that he and his wife had moved 3 hours away where it snows all the time and it would be really hard for them to travel that far in late October. I explained that we'd already checked the weather patterns and it was usually fine that time of year, but she kept insisting there would be problems. Then she started suggesting I use her house instead of our property. She told me her backyard would be so much better for a party because it was more accessible and she had better facilities for catering. I explained that we wanted to do it on our own land because that was the whole point. She argued that I should think about the logistics and how much easier it would be at her place. Then came the dress suggestions. She started sending me photos of dresses that were completely opposite to what I wanted. Instead of the gothic, witchy vibe I was going for, she was showing me traditional white dresses and pastel colors. She kept telling me these would look so much better on me and would be much more appropriate for a vow renewal. I told her I wanted something that reflected who we are and that I wasn't wearing white. She insisted that white was more classic and timeless. The breaking point came when she called me last week after her own vow renewal. I congratulated her on how beautiful her ceremony was, and somehow that turned into another lecture about my plans. She told me that after going through her own renewal, she realized how important it is to think about everyone else. Then she said the words that made my blood boil. This isn't about you, it's about being considerate of others. I asked her how my anniversary wasn't about me and my husband. She called me selfish and told me I needed to think about Dad and how hard it would be for him to travel. She told me I needed to think about the other guests who might not be comfortable with all the Halloween stuff and that I needed to have something more normal. I pointed out that this was normal for us and that this is who we are. She shot back that it wasn't who the family is and that I couldn't just do whatever I wanted without considering everyone else's feelings. I sat there listening to her lecture me about being considerate while she was literally trying to plan my entire anniversary celebration without any input from me or my husband. The irony was completely lost on her. I told her she was absolutely right. It wasn't about me, it was about Dad and everyone else's comfort. So I would just do something more private and intimate with two close friends instead. There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then she asked what I meant. I explained that she had convinced me. Since having the celebration we wanted was too inconsiderate, we would just do something small with people who actually supported what we wanted. She started backtracking, saying that wasn't what she meant and that I couldn't just not have a family celebration. I asked her why not, since according to her, what we wanted didn't matter anyway. She tried to explain herself, but I was done. I hung up and immediately started planning something completely different. My husband was totally on board when I told him what happened. He told me, honestly, it sounded way better than dealing with my sister trying to turn our anniversary into her vision of what it should be. So now we're planning to take two of our closest friends deep into the woods at a beautiful spot we found about an hour away from our house. We're going to get all dressed up in our gothic finery, have a small ceremony surrounded by the fall colors, and actually celebrate our marriage the way we want to. No family drama, no compromises, no one telling us what's appropriate or considerate. My sister has been calling and texting nonstop since I told her about the change. She's alternating between trying to guilt me and trying to convince me to go back to the original plan. But with her modifications, of course. She keeps saying I can't just exclude the family and asking what people will think. I tell her they'll think we did what made us happy. She insists she was just trying to help make it better, and I ask her better for who because it wasn't better for us. She tells me she just thought if I made some small changes, everyone would be more comfortable. I tell her that I thought if I made some small changes, we could actually have the celebration we wanted instead of the one she wanted. When I told my dad about the new plan, he was completely supportive. He told me he understood that we might want something more intimate after all these years, and he was happy that we were doing something that felt right to us. My sister's whole argument about considering his feelings was completely off base. Now I'm looking forward to our woodland ceremony more than I ever looked forward to the original plan. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.